Today, we'll be learning how to multiply and divide integers. If you remember from our last lesson, an integer basically is a whole number which can be negative, positive, or zero. First off, let's go over some ground rules for multiplying and dividing integers. When you multiply or divide a positive number by another positive number, your answer actually is going to be positive. In our previous video, I gave you some reminders of how to remember this. When you have a happy person hanging out with another happy person, the overall mood is going to stay happy or positive. Let's take a look at another scenario. So let's make some space for ourselves. When you have a positive number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is going to be negative. Just like our previous video, if you have a happy person, a positive person, hanging out with a negative person, the overall mood is going to be negative because that negative person is going to bring the overall mood down, so to speak. Let's make some space for our final example. Let's say you have a negative number being multiplied or divided by another negative number. The answer is going to be positive. Just like in our previous video, when you have a sad person hanging around another sad person, they're going to talk about their problems and ultimately they're going to feel better about themselves at the end. So the overall mood is going to be positive. Let's recap what we just went over. So I'm just going to scroll out and here we go. So when you have a positive number multiplied or divided by a positive number, the answer is going to be positive. When you have a positive number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is going to be negative. And when you have a negative number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is positive. In our first example, we're going to look at negative 3 multiplied by negative 4. Before we deal with the signs, let's look at the numbers. We have a 3 and we have a 4. When you multiply 3 by 4, your answer is going to be 12. Now, let's look at the signs. That is a negative number, and that is a negative number. If you remember from before, when you have a negative number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is positive. So this 12 should be positive. However, you don't want to leave the positive sign in front of 12 because it is understood that it is positive. So 12 is our final answer. In our second example, we're going to look at negative 5 times 6. First off, we want to take a look at the numbers of 5 and 6. Let's go ahead and multiply that. 5 times 6 is 30. Afterwards, we want to deal with the signs. That is a negative sign, and over here we have no sign. But it is actually a positive number. Just like before, when you have a negative number multiplied or divided by a positive number, the answer is going to be negative. Therefore, the answer should be negative 30. Let's put a box around that. In this example, we're going to look at 5 bracket negative 2 bracket. You'll notice that there is no multiplication or division sign. If you look very closely, there is a number right in front of a pair of brackets. When you have that, this is actually multiplication. So there is a multiplication sign actually hidden between the 5 and the negative 2, which is in brackets. So if you really wanted to, you could rewrite this question as 5 multiplied by negative 2. However, you don't actually have to put in the multiplication sign as you've seen in this question. Let's go ahead and solve this question. First off, let's take a look at the numbers of 5 and 2. 5 multiplied by 2 is 10. Now let's take a look at the signs. You have a sign of negative over here, and you have no sign here. But remember, there's actually a positive sign hidden in front of that 5. So, as I've told you before, when you have a positive number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is going to be negative. So our answer of 10 actually is going to be negative 10, and that is going to be our final answer. In our final example, we're going to look at negative 6 times 4 times negative 2. This is a little bit of a longer question than the other ones, therefore we're going to take this step by step. First off, let's focus on the first two numbers of 6 and 4. 6 times 4 is 24. So let's make a little marking to indicate what we've just done there. However, we want to deal with the signs now. 6 is negative, 4 has no sign, but you know that if there is no sign, it is in fact positive. When you have a negative number multiplied by a positive number, the answer is going to be negative. Okay, now let's take a look at this multiply by negative 2. So I'm just going to write that in over here. We're going to use the exact same method. Let's take a look at these two numbers of 24 and 2. 24 times 2 is 48. Once we multiply those numbers, we have to deal with the signs. This is a negative number, and that is a negative number. When you multiply or divide a negative number by a negative number, the answer actually is going to be positive. However, we don't write in that positive sign as it's redundant, and it's understood that that number is positive. So 48 is our final answer. In these next set of examples, we're actually going to take a look at division. However, the method is exactly the same as multiplication. First thing you want to do is look at the numbers. We have a 14 and a 7. 14 divided by 7 is 2. Let's take a look at the signs. We have a negative sign here and a negative sign here. If you recall, when you have a negative number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the final answer is going to be positive. Therefore, this 2 is positive 2. Again, we don't write in the positive sign, so the final answer is 2. In this example, we're going to look at negative 8 over 8. A lot of students, when they first see this question, get confused because it looks like a fraction. When you have a number over another number, the operation actually is division. If you really wanted to, you could rewrite this question as negative 8 divided by 8. However, we are not going to do that. Just like before, the first thing you want to look at is the numbers of 8 and 8. Let's go ahead and divide 8 by 8. So 8 divided by 8 will give you 1. Now let's take a look at the signs. Over here you have a negative sign, and over here you have no sign. As we've learned before, if there's no sign, that actually is positive. Just like we've learned before, when you have a negative number multiplied or divided by a positive number, the answer is going to be negative. Therefore, that should be negative 1. And our final answer is negative 1. In our last example, we're going to look at 15 divided by negative 5. First thing you want to do is look at the numbers. 15, 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Afterwards, we want to look at the signs. We have a negative here, and over here we have no sign. Again, you need to remember that that is actually positive. If you recall, when you have a positive number multiplied or divided by a negative number, the answer is going to be negative. Therefore, our 3 should be negative, and that is our final answer.